Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah Show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
You know, it's a beautiful day, and I'm thankful to have a job. Let me just start with that.
So let me ask you something. When it's a beautiful day, does that encourage you to do more or less geeky projects? Are you like, nuts to this computer thing, I'm going to go sit outdoors and enjoy myself? Or is it like, it's beautiful, let me grab the laptop and go sit out in the back deck?
You know what? I have stopped working on my laptop too much because the last time I did it, I found that I rolled my shoulders and I was really sore the next day. I did that like in February. I went and sat on one of our comfy couches out in our living room. Mm-hmm. And after 6 hours or something like that of working on it, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was so sore the next day. So I try not to do that anymore.
Are you ready to have your mind blown?
Sure.
All right. The X-Rail glasses. This is something I have been, my body has been waiting for this, Steve, and it finally came to fruition and it finally came into reality, and now I couldn't be happier. So, problem is exactly what you're talking about. When you're trying to work off of a laptop, it almost all but guarantees that you have bad posture. Now, there are some human beings that are immune from this because they have ridiculous amounts of self-control. My father's one of them. He can sit there on a laptop and he can put his shoulders back and look straight. I don't even know how he does it because I can't even get my head to see the screen without leaning forward and getting into all sorts of bad things. And it does horrible things to my neck. Ask me how I know that. And, so anyway, that has launched this process, which I call MVBS, or minimum viable battle station. What is the minimum amount of workstation I have to be able to get work done? And what I've largely concluded is that equates to about a 2K 27-inch monitor, a keyboard, a trackball mouse, and then it gets really what I'm looking for is to get the monitor to the right height so that I don't struggle with what you just so eloquently described, which is the shoulders roll, you lean forward, that sort of thing. Problem is, try and take that on an airplane. Good freaking luck. It doesn't work. If you can travel inside of a suitcase or something like that, it's fine. I've got it down to 2 Pelican 1620 cases, but really trying to take it on an airplane is like, if I'm bringing it, it's all I'm bringing sort of a thing. And so for a long time, I've been looking for an answer, and the answer showed up in my lap by way of a pair of glasses called the X-Reals. Now, the X-Reals, they make, I believe it's the Air 2, and they are spatial glasses. And what's really cool about these is they allow you to do a couple different things. For one, you'll get like 150, 160-inch monitor, which I would describe very similar to that of Google Glass, that floats out in the middle. But unlike Google Glass, instead of running some proprietary operating system that is really just a companion device to your phone, in this case, it plugs in via a Type-C cable to your laptop and then uses just a standard HDMI output of your computer that projects onto the X-Rail glasses. The benefit? You can sit in your deck, on an airplane, in a cramped space, wherever you want, and the display will go up to wherever it is you're most comfortable. Then there are 2 modes it can operate in. One is the pinned mode. In the pinned mode, the display doesn't move. It stays in one place, and when you look up, the display is there. When you look down, the display is not there. The glasses support transparency, so you can still use your built-in laptop display, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, you don't want to look at your built-in display, or you don't want to see the people around you. Maybe that's the thing. You can tap the button a few times and it will black out everything. So all you can see is the display through the X-Rail glasses. In any event, I found them to be an incredible tool for if you need that, take the display with you everywhere. And I'm reevaluating the way that I've designed MVBS now to incorporate the X-Rail Air 2s, because that is a display that I can fit in my back pocket, quite literally, and then it comes with me. I had to see them in person. I had to play with them in person to really get bought in, because had you told me about them, I would have told you, yeah, but it won't be clear enough, won't be crisp enough. I wouldn't be able to work off of it for a long time. Not the case. In fact, I will use it as an auxiliary display to have messaging or email or a terminal up on the X-Reels, or as a primary display, and allows me to do that. So I'd be interested if sometime the next time you and I get into the same physical location, I'll let you take a drive with them and see what you think. I think you'll be impressed.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So first of all, what is the cost of that?
They are about $500.
Okay. I mean, that's not terrible. It's also not super cheap. The next thing is, doesn't wearing a pair of essentially sunglasses that you have to black out because you are going outside not to distract yourself kind of defeat the purpose of going outside?
Well, Steve, now you're asking the really, really, really great questions. Yes, it does. You can turn the tinting off, so it can just have the display. But to your point, if you're trying to take in nature and all of the things, obviously putting glasses on very much kind of takes away from that. Although there's probably still some benefits by way of exposure to the sunlight. There's probably still some benefits by way of clean air that you're breathing in, that sort of thing. For me, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is just changing my physical environment allows me to kind of reset, and it feels like I can take on a longer project, or I can dig deeper into a thing. Whereas if I'm going back to my same desk over and over and over again, or the same workstation, it just, I don't know, I get into like a grind, and then I almost feel like I'm worn out or I'm burnt out or something. And being able to just kind of move around has kind of helped that a little bit. I would tell you they are a must if you're a person that flies a lot. Like if you work out of an airplane, I used to only buy 13-inch laptops, in part because they had to fit on my lap or inside of the little plane tray. And I've got a great picture that exemplifies this. I took an Alienware X14 with me, which is not, I would not describe that as a large laptop. It's actually a very thin, light laptop for what it is. But you compare that to a small 13-inch laptop, and it's night and day to what it's like working on top of an airline tray. One is a pain in the patukas, and the other is actually quite pleasant. And so with the X-Reel, it's kind of nice because you can put the keyboard down where your shoulders are. For those that aren't into ergonomics, you should be. Again, ask me how I know that. You want to pull your shoulders basically down and back towards each other. And so we have a tendency to, as Steve was talking about, rolling our shoulders forward and kind of leaning forward. And what that does is it puts all sorts of tension on really what happens is your head goes forward. And when that happens, you have to think of your head almost like a 30-pound bowling ball. And so if your head is forward of the center of your neck rather than back and tight, you start to, then all these muscles and tendons have to like grab this bowling ball and pull it back. And over time, that pinches nerves in your neck and does all manner of terrible things to your body. So you don't want to do that. If you work in front of a computer all day, you really want to be cognizant of it. And the best way that was described to me by my physical therapist is if you take the back of your head, kind of follow your spine up, the back of your skull. If you were to put a point there at the back and you were to attach a little rope and you were to pull straight up, it would pull your chin back and it would pull the back of your head up towards the sky. That's really the position that you want to be in. And then you want to pull your shoulders back and towards each other. And from time to time, then move. Our bodies are designed to move. They're not designed ever to be in one position for very long. And I find the X-Reels help with all of that. One really cool thing about the new X-Reels, the first generation required a little external processor thing. And so you had to have this little box that you had to plug in. The new ones, everything is built right into the glasses. And so it's literally just a little Type-C cable that plugs into the glasses and plugs into your laptop. And then you've got a portable display anywhere you go. So I would say that if there's somebody out there that's saying, hey, I want to be able to work in very different environments, but I need a monitor to do that so I don't develop bad habits, the X-Reel might not be a bad way to go. They call them a spatial display, if you want to get all technical about it. I'll have a link in the show notes, xreel.com. They're pretty cool. Steve, do you want to get to some feedback?
What would you do if I said no?
Well, then we'd skip it and we'd just tell people pound sand. If we got stuff to do and then we don't got time, that's okay. No,
it is Ask Noah, so I suppose we should let people ask Noah something.
Okay, well, if you insist. Our first email comes in from Dan writes in and says, to the impeccable duo of the Ask Noah show. See, now you're going to tell that guy no? Come on. Greetings from North Idaho. In the past, you've both been so kind in answering my questions. I appreciate your time greatly. Here's another question that'll be easy for you. I'm building a home server. Never done that before. I have a small tower with 30 disks ranging, holy cow, 30 disks, ranging from SSDs to spinning Rust, all different sizes. What I would like to do is this. Manage and back up all my media from the cloud people's computers. Replace a lot of the services that we're dependent on for others like VPN, ad blocker, host games, etc. Now, all of the things I've heard you guys talk about with your home setups and other people's as well, what I haven't heard is the appliance level of such a device. I've heard you guys talk about this, that, and understand what it was until I got my Bamboo Labs P1S. I've been into 3D printing as an enthusiast since the Woolstrap days, when we were using drawer sliders and stepper motors from ink printers to run weed whacker filament through a janky hot end. Life got busy. I stepped away from the hobby. I kept tabs on it. Now, enter the Bamboo, and it's all plug and play. It's a massive amount of overhead I was spending to keep up with maintenance and troubleshooting. Gone. It's almost been nonstop going for 4 days. Very minor issues. Is the home server going to be the old school 3D printer? Lots of upkeep and maintenance, or is it going to be the new hotness? Okay, so let's start there. Here's where I would kind of open this up for discussion. I would say that when I first moved out of my parents' house and moved into my own place, one of the first things I did, in fact, not one of the first things, the first thing I did, it was the first thing I did. I set up at that time an IBM ThinkCentre, or I forget what they called it, but whatever IBM server platform at the time was, I bought a used IBM server and I put disks in it and I shared those disks out to my computer. And I ran that it didn't do much, right? It just stored data. But I ran that server as is, no backups, no redundancy, no setup. It was a used computer that I bought secondhand from, at the time, one of the companies I was working with. There was no plan. There was no engineering involved. It was just, hey, I installed an operating system, stuck some disks that worked when I got them, and it worked. And I ran that way for sure all the way through college, and probably a good few years after that. Did I do any maintenance? No. Is it best practice? Not really, but it worked and it got me to where I needed to be. So can you do it without doing any maintenance and just kind of set it, forget it? Sure you can. Absolutely. Now, the more complexity you add to it, the more services you add, the more you rely on it, the more critical that data is, it becomes increasingly less of a good idea if you're not going to set it up and architect it properly. But do all servers have to be this huge thing that you're taking on the equivalent of a mini data center? No, not at all. 100% you can set those things up in a very simple, straightforward way, and then put them on the planet and play with them and see how much you use them before you invest any more time. Am I steering down in a dangerous direction, Steve?
No, I think that part of it is pick an operating system that is suited for long term without tons of churn, such as, well, shameless plug, RHEL. I was a really big fan of Ubuntu in my home lab until RHEL 9 came out, and I really, really like RHEL 9. However, a Debian is also a good choice. The only reason why I wouldn't do Ubuntu off the top, if you're worried about maintenance, is because, every 3-ish years, you're going to have to roll the upgrades. And the reason why I say 3 and not 5 is because, speaking from personal experience, if you let it go 5 years, chances are you're going to encounter slightly more problems when you're trying to roll that guy forward, because it's unlikely that you'll wait until the end of its normal life cycle and then only upgrade once, like only upgrade to the next one. So Ubuntu, for example, every 2 years comes out with its long-term support, and it's got 5 years, right? So if you took 2004 and waited until 2404, which is the next, like the 2 releases later, so 4 years later, it's unlikely that you're just going to move from 2004 to 2204. and then 22, and then wait another 2 years and then follow that upgrade path. Normally, if you're like me and you're lazy, you're like, oh man, I waited the entire 5 years. I probably should upgrade all the way to current so that I buy myself another 5 years to be lazy. And when you are doing that level of generational change, generally it can be smooth. However, I have also experienced that jumping forward multiple generations can also incur other problems that you didn't encounter that are not necessarily related to Canonical, right? Moving forward, for example, if you're running some application, I'll give you a silly one, right? Mm-hmm. There's a Python visualizer library out there that works on 2004, but not 2204 and not 2404 because the libraries it relies on are no longer available. The versions of the libraries are no longer available. So if you're running something other than just the base OS on there and you try to roll forward, maybe it has a problem, right? And so those are the types of considerations I would be making. If you pick a long-term stable release as your base and start to play in VMs, then upgrading that underlying OS, it has very little that is actually upgrading, and it will be very solid for you. And do all of your experimenting inside of VMs. That's what I would say when if I had have had that knowledge given to me when I started, I would have spent a whole lot less time installing operating systems, let me tell you.
Okay. So, the VMs it's an interesting addition because that, frankly, it wasn't an option. When you and I got started, it was if you wanted a computer, you went and got a computer. And if you wanted to do something, you installed software on a computer. These days, you can go buy a computer and you can divide it up to do all manner of different things. And so, here'd be a thought. Would you start with a file server or would you start with a virtual host if you were start getting into home servering?
Oh, I would 100% start with a virtualization server. Like a file server doesn't do you much good in terms of any kind of learning. Sure, you might install NFS or Samba. Likely Samba. If this is your first foray into it, you're probably not deep into the Linux or the Mac world that is using NFS. So I assume that you're going to have some Windows footprint, and I don't see a huge learning benefit to the file server.
No, there's no learning benefit. It's delivery benefit. So, for example, one of the things that I struggled with early on was getting other people to use the thing. And so what was beneficial about a file server, everything runs off a file server. So you can, the wife stored her pictures on the file server and the TVs played their media off the file server, and you can tie a bunch of things to that. So that's kind of where I was going from a utilitarian standpoint of what can be delivered back out. So if I was to try to take that same approach with a virtual host, what would be the things you would virtualize first, or what would be the first things that you would set up?
So it really depends on what you're doing in your home, right? Like, are you by yourself or are you serving things for other people? That's the first thing that I would be thinking about. Do you consume media or do you just stream stuff from Netflix? Do you really like recipes and you want to think about digitizing recipes, or do you need a knowledge base? And this kind of dovetails into our next email when we get to it. But like, what do you do if you want to have some sort of blog or knowledge base or wiki that you keep internally to organize yourself? Like, all of those sorts of things would really guide what I think that I would start with again if I was doing it over again.
So I'll tell you one thing that just jumps right off the page to me. 30 drives. I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. If I were just getting into setting up my first server, I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. I would not put 30 drives in one box. I just wouldn't do that. There's a number of reasons I wouldn't do that, but the top of reasons why I wouldn't do that is 30, one of them is going to fail. And the more, especially when you're first getting into it and you're first learning, I wouldn't trust it for anything, right? There's a saying in the IT industry, everybody's got a development environment. Some people are fortunate to have a development environment that's separate from their production environment. And if there's anything that I have seen bit many a geek, it's they set out to do a project and then they get a little excited and a little ahead of themselves and the project becomes into quote unquote production, and then the family or the friends or whoever it is starts using it, and then the nerd goes back to play with his or her toy, but then we broke the thing, right? And so our operations manager at Ultispeed has a hilarious story of his family just becoming insatiated with him because he kept quote unquote breaking their internet. From his perspective, he was professionally developing. He was learning, and sometimes he got to restart the router. Sometimes he got to blow away the config. The problem is, so-and-so was watching Netflix in the next room, and now the internet's gone for the next 45 minutes while you're rebuilding the config or whatever it is. So I would, in fact, I had not a dissimilar conversation with the guy also named Steve. A few months ago, he's getting into IT and learning, and one of his hesitations to mess with anything and actually in his specific case, to take the jump into VLANs is he's afraid of breaking the internet at his house for his family. That's a very real concern. So I would implore you in the strongest possible terms to set, if you've never done it before, start with something and then kind of work your way up. Let's see if we could do this. What if we were to meet in the middle, Steve? What if we said, start with an Ubuntu base, take one drive or maybe a couple if you want to get fancy, but maybe an OS drive and then maybe a data drive, but start with installing Ubuntu as the base operating system. You could install the virtualization package so that you can install VMs atop that base operating system. If you wanted to take 3 of those spinning Rust drives that you have and put them into we've talked about this before, and I recall you having a different approach. I forget exactly what that is. I'll give you a second to tell me what that is. But if it were me, I'd put 3 drives in a VDEV, and I would use that as a ZFS storage thing. You could install so here's what we're accomplishing. We're learning how to install the base operating system. We're picking a base operating system that's highly versatile. Atop that base operating system, we have the ability to install virtualization, which is going to work on anything, but Ubuntu is nice because it also enables you to have native ZFS support. And so now we're playing with an enterprise-grade file system. Now maybe we're getting the best of all the worlds. We've got a ZFS pool to store our data on. We've got a hypervisor that we can install VMs on. And we've got practice installing a base operating system. How are we doing?
I would say, the architect in me pushes back and saying, well, we don't really have clear requirements. And so I don't like setting out on a journey when I don't know what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. So
I don't know that he knows what he's trying to accomplish.
Well, maybe he does and maybe doesn't. For example, are you interested in trying to figure out what skills are, if you walked into random large company, what Linux skills are going to be available? If it is literally, I'm just, hey, this is a hobby and I just want to, I think Linux is interesting and I just want to mess around, then sure. It really doesn't matter what base that you choose from that perspective, because it's your thing for there might be valid reasons, for example, to go with something like Nix. If you're learning from scratch and it's for you, I might even consider going that route from the perspective of you learn a lot about immutability and reproducible builds and the portability. If for example, you went to, the day I thought I'd be evangelizing for Nix, but if you're talking about hey, I want to be able to nuke something and bring it back quickly, as opposed to learning learning the operating system and then learning something like Ansible or Chef or pick thing here, starting off with something that was specifically designed to do that for you, like Nix, is a reasonable route, and it's one that I probably would have been really intrigued with early on. If you're interested more in transferable skills that you might use somewhere else, Nix is probably not the right way for you to go, because there's a lot of learning, unlearning stuff that happens between that and, we'll say, the quote-unquote traditional Linux desktops.
And so that's why I was saying
it makes a big difference what my kind of interests are in building this project.
Well, I'm kind of guessing here based on he uses the word enthusiast, he uses the word hobby. I'm kind of reading between the lines, but I am going to say I would start with a thing that you can wrap your head around, and the way that I choose to go about learning skills is I'll do it, then I'll document it, then I'll blow it away, and then I'll try and do it again. And that's regardless of what path you go down, that's probably the process I would follow, because whatever skill you learn then, or whatever process you're doing, you'll be able to evaluate, yeah, this is really working for me, or no, it's not, or here's where I ran into a pain point, or whatever it is. But you always want to be able to get yourself back to where you were. At least that's always really worked well for me. One thing that so he says, the second question is, can I preload it with one of the hard drives going into the server with all the goodies I want on there and just send it? Or is that what you guys are talking about when you say playbook? So here's the thing. Indeed, one of the many awesome things about Linux is you absolutely can do that, right? You can take a hard drive, you can put it into a computer, you can install things, you can get it all set up, and then once it's all dialed in and exactly the way you want it, you can pull that hard drive out and stick it in a different machine, and largely, other than renaming a couple of network interfaces from time to time, it's just going to work. It is actually a really beautiful, the way that Linux is architected that way is that does work. And it's more doable now with Windows 10 and Windows 11, but for a long, long time, that was not the case. If you tried to do that with the Windows drive, it just blue screen on you. It's better now, but yeah, you absolutely can do that. You can load a hard drive up, get everything set up the way you want, and then stick it in the server. So if that makes you comfortable, or you, for some reason, want to do that, by all means. I personally get uncomfortable anytime I have to do that. Anytime I can't install. In fact, that came up this week. I went to install, and I could not, for the life of me. It was an HP machine, and if you plugged a USB drive in, the UEFI would just hang for some stupid reason, and I could not get the machine I couldn't even get it to respond to key commands, let alone boot off of a USB drive. And I futzed around with it for a little bit and went, yeah, I'm done. And pulled the hard drive out, stuck it in a different machine, installed the OS, got everything set up the way I want, and stuck it back in the HP, and it was fine. So that's absolutely a valid route you can go. But I like having a clean boot guide. Hey, from step 1 is I plug in this drive. Step 2 is I boot off of this drive. Step 3 is I get into here, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting. He asks about a playbook. So let's take a step way back. Before you use anything, and I heard you mention, Chef and a couple other things, before you use any of those orchestration technologies or any sort of that system management stuff, Steve, what would you tell somebody if it was day one and somebody says, Steve, I want to be a system administrator when I grow up?
You got to know the thing that you're trying to accomplish before you automate it.
Yeah, 100%. Because what happens when it breaks, right?
Yeah, not if, when it breaks. We see this all the time at Red Hat. Like, we'll have super awesome pipeline that we developed in Ansible or, pick technology. We pick it up even within the same customer and drop it on another cluster, and it falls flat on its face. And you don't know why. And it could be any number of the variables, like just this computer smiled differently that day, or, whatever, solar rays. Anything can make things just not work properly. And it sounds ludicrous, I know, but trust me, you can spend a lot of time looking at a machine going, I cannot find the difference between this where it worked and that where it didn't work. And so if you don't know what you're setting up or how to set it up, then when your automation does break, you're kind of pooched.
Here's something else I think is worth digging into, because I think this sometimes get overlooked, and this is going to come off a bit swarmy. It's going to be a little bit, I don't know, but I believe it to be true. Can you talk about the value of system administrators / the job security of, let's call it A and B? System administrator A takes Steve approach. I want to understand everything down to its most elementary level. I'm happy to use the orchestration tools. I want to use the automation tools. I want my job to be faster when it can be and when it should be. If I'm doing anything at scale, I absolutely want to leverage all of the cool fancy things, and I want to explore them. But at the end of the day, I understand if all those tools go away, whatevs, back to an SSH command line I go, and clacking away. I'll get there eventually. Can you help me contrast that with system administrator B, who says, I don't need any of those. I'm just going to learn the automation thing because that's where all of the cool, fancy stuff is. And at the end of the day, I don't need to understand the low level stuff. As long as I can run the thing, I'll be able to get the thing done. How would you compare and contrast those two job roles and specifically their value to the marketplace?
So I'll start off by saying we need both people. Okay. I'll start off by saying that. But since you asked me specifically about me, I want to be in that position where I understand how things are working. The reason for this is because I'll give you a direct example. When you work on a large team, say deploying whatever it is, whether you are a consulting team or whether you're hired by the employer, not everybody's going to be at the same level. And you don't necessarily need everybody to be at the same level. You want some people to be good at documentation and some people to be good at running a repeatable process. But the people who are really handy to have in a firefight are the people that understand how the nuts and bolts work, because there's a big difference in your ability to build a troubleshooting muscle. And ultimately, the people who are most valuable during major times of crisis, like if a Windows machine blue screens and it's running like a super important process for this client, they're not calling the level 1 tech who can run the automation. They're not calling the level 2 tech. They're calling the people like, can you read a stack trace? What is happening here? How do I correlate that? If you want to be successful and be known, like you learn how this stuff works and be tapped on the shoulder when it happens, right? You need both people. You don't want to have a team full of the super high type A people that want to know everything about everything, because, well, first of all, that'll cause conflicts and all the rest of that. And then there's something to be said for, if all I had to do for my job is sit there and run the automation and be there to like coax it along, I'm not going to be super happy in it. And the people that want that deeper knowledge, that's a generally true statement. Right. So you need the people that want to work at that level and the people that work at a deeper level. In terms of how that plays out in the market, like I said, the people that are going to command the higher salaries, there's fewer of them, but they're going to be the deep troubleshooters and the people that you call at whatever time to bail you out of this jam. And especially if you are working for yourself, that commands a lot of money. Right. At that point, you can charge $500, $700 an hour because it's that critical to the people that they know that you can solve their problem.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to get there one way or the other, which is not necessary. Here's something else I've seen that should scare any of the system administrator wannabes that are out there that are comfortable with I just log into the web UI and I click on the button and that solves my problem, right? The thing that should scare you is there is a very concerted and very rapid migration of systems moving towards what I would call like a mix between managers and system administrators. That is to say, where there was a time when you called the tech guy to do all of the things, more and more, some of those roles are being handed to business people who have no tech background almost whatsoever. But you know what they can do? They're used to logging into a web UI to manage their bank account and manage their email and everything else. And so it turns out we can give them administrative access, quote unquote, to all manner of, quote unquote, some of the system administration type things and let them do that. And it turns out they're more than capable of doing that in a lot of cases. And so I've seen organizations where they allow them to do things like provision new VMs. They have a button and they click on it and it spins up a new VM, or restart things and those sorts of things as they get. If that's a long way of saying, if the best technical value you bring to the table is you know how to click around the web UI, well, I got news for you. It's not going to be long before other people are going to be able to do that too. People that have no technical expertise, people that have no professional IT training, they don't necessarily need it anymore. They can click the web button too and click their way through the web UI. So those tools, are they useful? Sure they are. Are they convenient? When I was sitting at a pool 2,300 miles away and had a problem. And was it really awesome to be able to pull my phone out and pull Cockpit up on my cell phone and take care of something without ever having to reach for my laptop? Yeah, it is kind of pretty cool that you can do those things. But just when those buttons don't work or when those things don't work, being able to actually pull out a terminal SSH in and go fix the problem, that's what's going to in my mind, is what's going to separate the script kiddies from the real ninjas. So all that to say, that's why you shouldn't use those automation tools, because they, in some ways, will make you weaker. Once you get your head and you get a great command down of how to do the things from the ground up, then, and absolutely you should, leverage all those tools to the hilt. So now let's answer this question about a playbook. When we talk about a playbook, what are we talking about?
So in Ansible world, a playbook is actually a set of tasks that you are asking the automation engine to ensure that the state is consistent. So what that means, Ansible via its playbooks is a way for you to declare what your desired state is. I want Apache, I want it to be running, and I want this website, and I want these vhosts. Or I want Docker installed, and I want Firewall-D and Cockpit running. You declare that these are the things you want it to do. You don't actually sit down and mock out all of the commands. So you actually declare that that's what you want. And a playbook is a series of tasks that you're asking the automation engine to go and do for you.
So we want a consistent state of a particular machine, or a particular a machine to have a particular configuration or a particular layout. Ansible allows us a way that we can send that, or that's really not accurate, but so I guess put more practically, it would be this, right? You want to install a particular package. One way to do that is to send the command to install this particular package. But the problem is, well, on Ubuntu, that's one command. On Fedora, that's something else. On Alma, might be something else yet. On Arch, that's going to be something else. And so there's going to be a variance there. Additionally, what if the package is already installed? Then it's a waste of time to run that command because it's already there. So, and lastly, how do we know if the package is there or not there? And so Ansible fixes a lot of those problems by saying, hey, I want this package to be present. Whatever that means for you, make that package present. And so if you're on Fedora and you're using DNF, do it this way. If you're on Ubuntu and you're using app, do it that way. If you're on Arch and you're using Pacman, do it this way. And it doesn't matter then, as a system administrator, when I reach out to a computer, I just want the package Nginx to be present. I could care less if it's installed via DNF or apt or Pacman or whatever. I just want that package to be there. And so the advantage is you can design things in such a way such that when you go to touch that machine again, so the server crashes, you go install the operating system. It doesn't matter if you change what operating system is on there, you're going to get the same results every time, or at least that's the idea. Where it becomes a very powerful tool, and where now that I have kind of fallen down this rabbit hole, it would be impossible for me to climb my way back out. We want to go do updates. We want to go update, and so we design. Let's say we host Nextcloud for a number of different places, and we've gone through, and it's been a multi-year process to get everything tweaked exactly the way that we want it. And there's all manner of different things that, especially depending on if you're using OnlyOffice or not using OnlyOffice, and how many users, and are they doing video calls, and all those things. Each of them have a different tweak that had to be made and troubleshot and all the rest of it. So we finally get all that dialed in, and everything works great. Awesome. Now another customer says, hey, we also want a Nextcloud instance. Instead of having to do all that work over again, we can take that same playbook that already has all of those dialed in values and all that customization that we've done, and just run that playbook with a different name, and the exact same thing is going to appear on a different server, but now it's using this different customer's domain name or whatever. The advantage has been Once you get all those things up and running, now you want to go update them. We can do it on a development instance to say, hey, let's test to make sure that the next version of Nextcloud works. Okay, yep, all the updates come down. Yep, they're working the way we want. Nothing is broken. Awesome. Now make it so. And Ansible will go out, and all I have to do is add to the hosts file the IP address or fully qualified domain names of those servers and say, now I want all these machines to be updated. And the next time that playbook runs, it's going to go through and update all the servers at the exact same time, reach out and do all of them the exact same way, identically, every single time. Something goes wrong, something fails, no big deal. It's actually doing it from scratch every time. So if there's a task that has already been completed, like that software already exists or that file is already there, it will see that and it will acknowledge it, and then it'll just move on. But if something has changed, like something got reinstalled or the server crashed or whatever, no big deal. We just run the exact same playbook, and it maybe updates 23 of the instances, and then on the 24th instance, because it crashed or went down or they got a new server or whatever it was, it redeploys the entire thing from scratch and starts all over again and does all of the work. Now, I, as the administrator, I didn't change anything. I left, all I did was have my little host file that has a list of all the fully qualified domain names for the servers that I wanted to make sure wound up on the latest version of, in my hypothetical example, Nextcloud. It allows you to do an economy of scale in ways that we didn't previously have a good way to do it. Now, to those that are going to say, well, what about Chef and what about... I would tell you the key thing that landed me on Ansible over Chef and Puppet and all the rest of them, it's clientless. The only thing that has to be true for Ansible to work is I have to have SSH access. Now, that doesn't sound like it's a big deal, or that doesn't sound like that would be a huge benefit, but let me tell you something. We were working in an organization that had switches from like the early 2000s. These are old switches, really old switches. But you know what function they had? They had SSH. So you know what that meant? That meant I could get into them. And even though there wasn't an Ansible module for those switches because they were so unbelievably old, it didn't stop us from being able to add it to the exact same, I shouldn't say exact same, because there was some substantial customization we had to do to make it, effectively what you're doing is you're hand running commands. But all that to say, we are able to take the existing information and the way that it's interpreting information out of the playbook to configure modern switches, which have, like Cisco has a built-in Ansible module to do the configuration. We're able to take that and say, okay, this really antiquated old switch that the only thing it has going for it is it has SSH and maybe not even a modern version of SSH and certainly not modern encryption algorithms, but hey, I can at least get into it. I didn't have to, if that was Chef or that was Puppet or was anything else, you'd have to run an agent on the device. In this case, if I can SSH into it, it can be commanded via Ansible, and that to me has been that to me is why Ansible takes the cake. Then you flip it from the people that say, well, but what if you want an agent? Well, Ansible pull is a thing. And so the way that they address that is you can run a little agent that sits on a computer or a server or whatever and reaches out. And indeed, that's how I'm doing our website. We started hosting Hugo sites for people. And what the people wanted was, hey, when I push, we tell our clients, hey, when you want to make a change to your website, log into GitLab and make whatever change you want and wait, and the website rebuilds. And the way that that's working on the back end is there's an Ansible pull that goes out and says, hey, I need this playbook run against me. Please rebuild me because it has something changed or is something changed. I need to be rebuilt. And it'll go reach out and the playbook will run and it'll reset the entire thing up from scratch and or say, okay, the only thing that's necessary is everything's there. It's all installed. It's all running. Just need to have the newest version of the Hugo content. And so it'll pull that down. This past week or the week before, it had the latest content, but it turned out that content changed, and so it needed an update and to get the newest version of all the things. And so Ansible sees that and says, hey, let me get you the latest version of all those things. And so it really reduces once you get your head wrapped around it, and once you kind of have a head start on it, it allows you to rebuild from scratch much faster. So I have a small little flash drive that I carry with me everywhere I go. And on it is a little playbook that rebuilds my laptop. And for a while, I haven't done this for maybe a few months, but it used to be every few weeks, I was getting in the habit of, I would do a clean install of my laptop, plug the flash drive in, and I would run the playbook, and it would go through and do all of the things. And where the rubber really started to hit the road for me, where I was like, I'm never going back, there was a package. And the package, which I couldn't tell you as I sit here and record this episode, I cannot tell you what the name of this package is. But this package allows you to pass USB devices through to a libvirt host. And it's not something we use terribly often, because you know how many times people say, hey, Noah, you know what I'd really like to do? I'd like to walk back to the physical server and plug a flash drive in, and then I want you to map it to I mean, it's not that it's never happened, but it certainly isn't a common thing. It's just not something I do very often. But you know where I do that all the time? On my laptop. The problem has been for years, every time I want to do that, I forget what the name of that package is. And so I go back out and I go and find it, and I'm like, why doesn't this thing work? And the error message, the way it presents in Virt Manager, is kind of strange. It doesn't say you're missing the USB emulated host or whatever that package that I can't remember is. It doesn't tell you, well, you're missing this package. It just says something along the lines of resource locator, and then it gives you the little USB ID thing, not found or not here, something along those lines. And if you look into it, it's because it's missing that package, so it can't do the USB pass-through. I started carrying that little flash drive with me that had the playbook. Still can't remember the name of the package, but guess what? It's on every laptop I've used in the past year. Why? Because I solved that problem one time, and every time after that, I haven't thought about it. I just run the playbook, and that package, along with every other thing I use on my laptop, just shows up, and it just works. And so do I have the ability to, if it were to ever fail, go back? Yeah, I can. And while I vehemently disagree with this idea of Ansible as quote-unquote self-documenting, there is some value in, at least I can go take that flash drive and I could plug it into my laptop, and I could scroll through the YAML file, which is largely just a big text document, and I could tell you, hey, this is the particular package that I'm using, or these are the things that I'm installing. You can go step through and see what it's doing, because it is human readable, and you can go trace through it and say, hey, what's changing or what's here. So for all of those reasons, I would encourage you to eventually get there, but I wouldn't start there. I'd start with getting a solid base operating system, whatever that is. If you want to go the Nix route because you're interested in reproducibility, do so. If you want to go a more traditional route, you might look at Red Hat or you might look at Ubuntu, but I would start with something that you can get your head wrapped around, that you understand, that you can get up and running, give it an IP address, and then largely scratch your own itch. Like Steve said, is it a recipe thing? For me, it was media. That was the thing that really, if there was one thing that got me into hosting my own stuff, it was, I didn't want to pay for streaming services. After I had kids too, this became a big thing. We would buy DVDs and then they would get scratched and then they would fight over them, and all manner of different bad things happened. All those problems went out the way when we started ripping them. And then they just went on the NAS, and then they were available on every TV, and every kid could watch the same movie at the same time, as many times as they wanted, and there was no scratching it because they were just files. Oh, by the way, bonus points, that we want to go on a vacation, they want to take somewhere, they can copy them to their laptop or smart thing and take it with them. So, I don't know, how'd we do, Steve? Would that give you something to go off of if you were interested in hosting a server for the first time?
I think that was probably one of the most thorough answers we've given on this show. Maybe he's hit a point of passion for us.
All right. Jeremy writes in and says, hi, Noah and Steve. I've begun creating documentation and tutorials for building a Kubernetes cluster for the home lab for development and testing purposes. I'd appreciate any input as I create these tutorials. Here's the beginning. And then he links to kubedevlab.com with his tutorial. Let me know if you have any ideas, and I'd help folks learn how to operate Kubernetes clusters. So Steve, this is pretty cool. Anytime there's a community resource or something that's new, I particularly like stuff that teaches people, because I feel like you're giving a person a fish, or excuse me, you're teaching a person to fish as opposed to just giving a person a fish. So I like that. I checked it out. It looks pretty cool. I haven't run through any of his tutorials, and it looks like he's still got some work to do at the very end. So I might wait to do so. But you also have a Kate's Lab that you've kind of gallivanted around the country, teaching people firsthand how to use Kubernetes. Talk about that.
Well, so I don't want to steal Jeremy's thunder. I actually included it in the show notes so that Jeremy might go and take a look to maybe draw inspiration. So just in brief, a lot of times at conferences and stuff like that, people are interested in learning Kubernetes, and oftentimes I get asked to do like little labs or whatever, and sometimes they're all day labs. And so the repo just has 5 or 6 labs set up for either Ubuntu or for RHEL-based distros. And the purpose behind them was to learn vanilla Kubernetes. And specifically, there's this thing out there called Kubernetes the hard way, and it really is intense. This is not that. It is more intense than using kubeadm, and so back up just a little bit. There are helper scripts out there like kubeadm or K3s where they really help you get up and going quickly. My purpose of this, going back to the theme of the entire show, was you need to learn how to do these things so you can learn how to fix them. So the labs kind of walk you through standing up and picking your own network provider and all these sorts of things. And so the purpose of this was, hey, Jeremy, you might want to check this out and adapt it for your documentation, because I'm not particularly interested in putting more documentation like Jeremy's doing, but maybe the lab will be useful to supplement it.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of March 23rd, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. The ebook reader Calibre 8.0 is now available. The Linux kernel 6.14 is out. The GNOME team has announced the release of GNOME 48. Blender 4.4 is now available. Zulip, an open source team chat, has released version 10. In distro news, Endeavour OS has released Mercury Neo. Finis 125 has been released. Serpent OS has rebranded to Aaron OS. Rocky Linux has announced a preview of Rocky that's specifically optimized for environments with the most stringent security requirements. And the creators of the unique Chimera Linux distro are dropping support for RISC-V because the kit built on the open source instruction set architecture just isn't fast enough and is holding up their development pipeline. In security news, Al-Babet ransomware has evolved to target Linux and Mac OS. And Microsoft has proposed a new Hornet security model for the Linux kernel. In open source AI news, IBM has donated 3 AI-related projects to the Linux Foundation. Trend Micro is going to open source an AI agent and model to drive the future of agentic cybersecurity. Hugging Face has submitted an open source blueprint challenging big tech in the White House AI policy fight. AlexNet source code is now open source. It was first released in 2012, and AlexNet sparked a revolution in AI and computer vision. And lastly, a recent Harvard study has said that open source is worth $8.8 trillion to the economy. However, researchers warn that companies contribute far too little to the development of open source tools.
Atypical asks, hey, do you know of any privacy-respecting search engines? What do you recommend? So the go-to example is, of course, DuckDuckGo. But one thing I think is worth talking about is SeerXNG. We'll have a link for you in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. What SeerXNG does is it will go out and actually perform a legit Google search, and then it proxies those results back to your SeerXNG instance, which is then exposed to you. So the way it works like this: you spin up a DigitalOcean droplet, you self-host SeerXNG. SeerXNG is actually doing the Google search, but as far as Google concerned, you know who's doing the Google search? DigitalOcean's doing the Google search, not you, the privacy-respecting user. The privacy-respecting user gets to sit at your home behind your desk, and it's proxied through. The advantage? You get all the goodness of Google without any of the privacy invasive stuff that comes with it. We'll have links for you, as well as all of the articles and references in the show notes. To follow us, to keep up with the latest live, I'm at Ask Noah, or I'm at Colonel Linux. He's at Linux Ovens. The show at Ask Noah Show. We're back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com.